Hello, I'm Rajan Datar, a broadcaster, journalist, and conference moderator. And today I'm talking to a man who aims to be a leading player in the global tourism industry. Harry Theoharis served as Greece's Minister of Tourism from 2019 to 2021 and helped boost Greece's global appeal through marketing campaigns that celebrated the country's heritage and scenic beauty, and at a particularly precarious time for tourism during COVID. Harry is also former Deputy Minister of Finance and currently serves as a Member of Parliament in the Hellenic Republic. He has now been endorsed by the Greek Prime Minister to be a candidate for Secretary General of the UN World Tourism Organization, now known as UN Tourism. Welcome, Harry. Let's start with
Thank
your
you. Thank you,
bid.
Rajan, for the kind invitation. Thank you.
Pleasure. Let's start with your bid to be UN Tourism Chief. Tell me, what do you think are the transformational changes needed within the organization to enable it to be more effective in helping member states implement effective tourism strategies?
Well, Rajan, we live in very strange times, I would say, both for the world in general, wearing my politician's hat, international relations, the digitalization, the sustainability issues that are being championed by the UN, all shape a landscape which is shifting all the time. And of course, we have to be very, very vigilant and attentive in trying to find solutions to those challenges. Tourism cannot be outside this environment, cannot be disjointed by all this. So it is affected by all those changes and can be a force for good, can be a force that affects those changes and mitigates the issues that we're currently facing. Tourism can be a force for peace. While we see a lot of wars erupting in many places of the world, tourism can create prosperity while we see many people having and communities going through difficulties. But in order to do that, in order to make this transformation, we need to follow what's happening, like the digital trends. AI is a big trend that already is affecting the face of tourism. And of course, other things, the energy transition and whatnot, but also issues like resilience, issues that we did not think about before, but now hurricanes, floods, fires raging across many areas of the globe force us to think about those things and see what kind of financial instruments, what kind of cooperation between nations, what kind of unity we need to foster in order to raise up those challenges. So UN Tourism is an organization that can be at the center of things, and unfortunately, I believe that currently it is not.
And in terms of practical changes that you could make to UN tourism in order to be a much more effective organization, what are you proposing?
Yeah. Well, we need to focus on a few things. We need to first have our targets in sight to see what we need to do. So the first thing that we need to achieve is much more transparency of the organization. This organization is an organization built on trust because it needs to bring member states that perhaps even sometimes normally do not speak to each other. We actually have currently in the Executive Council of the organization two member states that are at war with each other. So in order to build trust, we need transparency, we need accountability, we need measurable outcomes, KPIs, and we need reporting back to our members. So those kind of changes, very practical in nature, in the sense of defining those KPIs, in the sense of measuring project outcomes and reporting those outcomes back to the member states will create the kind of trust that's required, that the money of the member states is well spent, and the outcome is an outcome that helps and creates value for those states.
Do you think there should be more collaboration between countries and perhaps even between the public and private sectors when it comes to tourism on the global stage?
Yes, the demand for unity is now stronger more than ever, I would say. We've seen disjoint efforts, the countries working not together, but viewing tourism as a field of competition. This is not true. I'll give you a simple example. When a US traveler travels to Europe, he doesn't even think of Central Europe as which country is what. He wants to go, or she wants to go to Prague and also to Berlin and also to Bratislava and also to Vienna, etc., etc. So they see the area without actually seeing the borders, etc. They want, I mean, they don't do it every year. They can only do it every 5 years, 10 years, depending on the circumstances. So they want to make the most of it, meaning they want to ensure that they go to many places. So that means that even in the marketing side, which is the most competitive part of the equation, destinations need to cooperate with each other. So the same goes with the private sector and the public sector. If we are to make successful investments, and of course we understand, all of us, that tourism is fueled by investments in hotels, in education, in many areas, then those private investments need to come together with infrastructure investments. And again, those are usually not private money, they're government money or multilateral institutional. So again, we need the cooperation of many agencies and organizations. And finally, we need to have a kind of trust that the framework will have some sort of continuity. There's going to be stability in order for those investments to happen. And that kind of trust, sometimes even the governments on their own, they cannot provide. They cannot provide a sense of security when governments change every 6 months, every 4 years, every, 3 years, 5 years, depending on the political timetable. So UN tourism, again, can be the hub to bring everybody together and to create this kind of trust that's paramount to the success of all of us, really.
I have noticed recently that UN Tourism and the WTTC, which represents the private sector, they do seem to be working together more, for example, in dealing with sustainability and with climate change. Is that something that you encourage?
Yes, of course, but I think we saw very little of that over the past 8 years. And any timid steps towards that direction, I wholeheartedly endorse. But I think we need to make strides towards that direction. The problems, unfortunately, the sustainability calculus and the transition that we need to, all of us, to make, the investment in underdeveloped areas, in emerging destinations, require huge funds. And those funds cannot move unless there is adequate trust, as we mentioned already. So it's very important to work together, the private sector, to take into account its sensibilities, its modus operandi, the way they expect things to happen. At the same time, of course, we need to set very specific rules in order to ensure that any investment actually benefits the local community, benefits the people of the area, and is done in such a way that it sustains both the environment, but also the culture of the destination, because we're very wary of places that have been affected too much, altered too much by the touristic flows. And as a result, they have lost the heart and the basis of their appeal. So we don't want that as well.
I want to focus on that a bit more later on in this conversation. But let's look at your own track record during the pandemic as Minister of Tourism in Greece. How did you go about dealing with the huge challenges that COVID threw up?
Yeah, those challenges, I would say, are challenges that Africa, in many ways, is facing, because it's a very much an emerging destination. It has a very small piece of the global touristic pie. And Greece, of course, developed destination, but at that time, everything stopped, time stopped. So effectively, we started from scratch. And we needed to do many things. First of all, innovate. We used AI to test our people at the borders, the people that were coming in, etc., to keep ourselves and themselves safe. We needed to engage and connect to them where they were during the time where they couldn't even travel at all. That was also a time to have an innovative marketing strategy. We use synergies between flights and the cruising industry, for example, in order to foster more connectivity. That's something that's missing in Africa. And of course, we kept a constant discussion open with the stakeholders in the touristic industry so that they knew exactly both the decisions that we were making and the reasoning behind those decisions. And as a result, we were able to create stronger relationships, the relationships that are usually created during times of hardship, like the times of hardship that we have with COVID. So all those things are lessons that I took and my country took very close to heart. And we can all bring all that knowledge to UN Tourism and through UN Tourism to the other member states. Now, I don't want to say that Greece is a special case. Another thing that's lacking, and it's lacking in terms of the cooperation that we should have, the unity, is to be able to showcase the best practices that many nations are pioneering in many different areas. Some in biodiversity preservation, others in energy management, others in fostering community tourism and ensuring that tourism benefits the community. So it's not just Greece. All the member states have something to offer in terms of innovation and best practices. And my vision is to make UN tourism the pedestal that those countries can use to showcase, and then through that to be able to create the hub of practitioners, of consultants, etc., that will take those best practices and scale them, make them into actually projects that can be sold out to the industry, the community, at large, and as a result, bring the benefits that one country has seen for itself to the other destinations as well.
Just sticking with that time of crisis, what lessons did you learn when you were the chair of the UN Tourism Crisis Management Committee? What did that tell you?
Well, the first thing that they told me is that we need to be very, very practical about what we're doing. There's a lot of discussion about how tourism is good. We started with that. We started with declarations and a lot of discussion about how the country should balance between the safety but also the livelihood of the tourism professions, etc. But this was not enough. Saying that you need to balance is one thing. Offering specific ways of balancing is another. That's why I proposed the creation of the Crisis Technical Committee, and I chaired it as well. And we supported specific concrete initiatives. Greece pioneered and pushed for a pan-European digital certificate. This was a very important part of Europe's recovery, and not just Greece's, because we had it. Greece stipulated the use of that certificate, but by pushing it out to Europe and through our support, my support and the committee support, and our members who were from IATA, ICAO, and all the other organizations to push Europe in that direction, it allowed Europe to recover faster than other regions in the field of tourism. So the lesson is be practical, be vigilant, follow what's happening, because especially at that time, the doctors and the experts were creating the blueprint as week by week. So follow developments, be flexible and reactive, and at the same time be very specific in what you're doing and explain yourself to the others.
Now, you raised the issue, the issues that are affecting certain parts of the world at the moment, and one of them is so-called over tourism. What's your diagnosis and what's your suggestions for how we can address that issue?
Well, this was an issue that was raised a lot before COVID, and then suddenly time stopped. So we also realized the other side of the pendulum, what it looks like when you had zero sustainability in terms of the economic and the social side of sustainability, not just the environmental one. We see very interesting phenomena and very dangerous phenomena. For example, with the rise of short-term rentals, we have for the first time joined two different markets, the market of housing with the market of touristic letting out of in the hotels and rooms. The problem with that is that the housing market is a very socially and politically fragile and important market, whereas tourism is a development side of things. It's nice to have, and it has positive connotations. But the lack of housing for the population, of course, it has a lot of negative connotations. And now we correlate those two markets and creating potential time bomb for politicians and for the society. So we need to come up with suggestions, with ways to regulate the markets in such a way that they can allow for this balance, to have enough long-term rentals so that the rents can be acceptable to the population, and at the same time use the supply side where this is possible to augment the touristic supply with the short-term rental supply. There are many tools to do that. Countries are experimenting with bans, they're experimenting with taxation, they're experimenting with pushing for more investments in the housing sector. So there are many tools that we can use. I think it's high time that UN Tourism did a thorough and proper assessment of those tools and how they work and whether they actually create more problems than what they solve, or vice versa, in order to be able to give concrete advice to our member states.
And then on the flip side of over tourism, there is still the need to support global community development, isn't there? And there's still great inequality between the haves and the have-nots in the
Yes.
tourism industry. So again, how do you propose countering that?
Well, you're right. And I think that's the fundamental problem that UN Tourism has to face, in that its constituents, the member states, do not necessarily have the same goals and the same issues to solve. So you have developed destinations with very much the issues of managing of the flows and managing of the destinations at the forefront, and sustainability, of course. And how do you make the transition effort from a well-established and an investment that's already there to the new era? And then you have emerging destinations where you have fewer investments and as a result, fewer costs of transition, but you need to put the rules up front so that you avoid the mistakes of the developed destinations and leapfrog to the forefront of what technology can offer. But as well, those destinations are thirsty for connectivity, thirsty for marketing, thirsty for share of voice in the global touristic community's share. So there, perhaps what's lacking is education, the personnel, strategy. They don't have the tools to create a coherent strategy. So all those things we need to identify and create the kind of support mechanisms through UN Tourism to those destinations, but not necessarily have the strongest financial means to get them, in order to support them and allow them to develop a coherent strategy to develop the touristic industry.
And one problem, one big issue that is certainly affecting the global south more than the north, although everyone is affected by this, is the contribution from tourism to greenhouse emissions, and the effect of that on a very fragile global ecosystem.
Yes.
So give me examples again of how you think tourism, the industry, can help to ameliorate these issues. Sorry, to reduce these issues.
Yeah. Well, again, this is the problem of the century. It's a huge task, and the tourism industry, according to the best research we have, emits about 8% of the global emissions, give or take. And unfortunately, the numbers that we got in Baku are that it has only adjusted about 1% its emissions. Of course, this is too small an amount, both compared to the task at hand, what we have to do, and unfortunately to what other industries have already done. So it goes below the yardstick, the benchmark, in both those areas. So we need to do much more. And I think we need to look ourselves in the mirror as UN Tourism, as member states, whether we're failing in our duty and in the mission of UN Tourism. Because what is UN Tourism except to get those SDGs and honor the UN part of the name, because the SDGs are set by the UN, and push them in reality down to the level of the field in the touristic community and honor the tourism part of the name. So we have a lot of things to do in that respect. Now, what can we do? I think one important and concrete issue is what we mentioned before. There's already a lot of things that have been done, but we don't need to just give awards or do an event to showcase them. Pilot projects are not enough. We need to move towards the scaling of those projects. We need to move towards the copying of those projects across regions, across destinations, and across different sides of the industry and the products. So in order to do that, we need to create the knowledge hubs, the centers of excellence, to create the community. Again, we're going back to the unity of the cooperation and collaboration that we need to foster in order to create this critical mass of practitioners that will push those projects out. Because those projects, of course, they're not just on paper, they need to become real, positive changes. So the value needs to be everywhere in the value chain. You need the practitioners and the consultants to actually make money selling those projects, so copying them, moving across from hotel to hotel and from travel agent to travel agent. And when the project finishes, you need the travel agent, the hotel chain, etc., to get value. Now, whether it's top value in terms of the revenue that they get, or bottom line value in terms of the expenses that they will lower, or whatever it is, they have to find value. So we need to stop thinking in terms of the public sector mentality, but we need to think of how do we mobilize the private sector. And the best way to mobilize is to create the conditions where they have products and services to be able to sell them, and they'll do the rest. They'll do the marketing. They'll do the convincing in implementing those projects.
Now, as you mentioned there, UN tourism does have a responsibility to the planet, to the world, to the people of the world. Do you feel that there is perhaps a trade-off between the desire for growth, never-ending growth in economic terms, in terms of the industry, but also on the other hand, the desire to save the planet? Is
Yeah.
that a contest? Is that a trade-off?
Well, this is getting outside the realm of the remit of a Secretary General, because we're moving towards the political economy side of things. And of course, what's the limit of our growth? But I think we haven't reached that point. And the good thing is that we have now technology and AI and all the new tools that can drive productivity in a sector that's plagued by the productivity problem. Countries that rely a lot on tourism, they don't have a lot of they're not productive in their economies. And this is one of the problems against tourism that we hear very often from economists, that you should move away from tourism and move towards more efficient industries and more productive industries to increase your GDP. Well, the digital transformation is starting to come to the heart of tourism as well. Of course, tourism is inherently a person-to-person experience. You need the person to serve you in some way in order to be able to relax. But still, there are many other things that can be efficiently changed in order to increase the productivity of the sector. So this is one potential that can make a big difference, potential of the digital tools that are emerging, and we should exploit that. So there are, as I said, there are many trends that we need to monitor, and we need to try to use those trends to our advantage. But at the same time, we need to focus on those three things. I mean, my intent and my vision is focused on three areas. One is transparency, as we already mentioned. The other is unity, because only through unity can we achieve the goals that we have. And the last one is growth, which I firmly believe that all those three are interlocked in a strategic triangle, in which you cannot have any of those unless you have all three. So this is why I believe that we can make a difference if we go straight towards all three directions at the same time.
You mentioned AI earlier, and I know that you are actually a scientist by training, and that you specialized in tech and finance in the first part of your career.
Yeah.
A lot of people are scared of AI. A lot of people are worried it takes away jobs. Are you excited by it, or do you think there are issues with it?
Well, I'm a software engineer, so I have to be excited. But I've been coding since I was 14 years old. So this is a very something that I have very close to my heart, and I've worked in the field for many decades. So this is important for me. So I'm excited, but I do not downplay the risks that come with it. And it's a profound change. I don't want to necessarily quote Hariri when he says that with AI, we're going through a transformation, well, not unlike any other, but so rare that it happened only once before in the history of humanity. So this is the kind of importance and significance of what we're actually seeing right before our eyes, and what will happen in the decades ahead. So we have to be very careful. One thing, for example, just to give one negative thing, because the positive, I'm sure we can agree on many positive things, but let's focus on one possible negative thing that I haven't seen anyone discuss about. It's much easier with AI to streamline the booking experiences, the selecting automatically the best fares and itineraries, and create something with out of thin air in terms of your. And some people initially timidly and then more confidently will start trusting AI to book their holidays and do everything. It's much more difficult to automate the spa experience and the food and eating and stuff. Of course, AI is not very good at that. We have to feel it for ourselves. It has to be a somatic experience in order to be meaningful. So what we might see is that AI removing a lot of the jobs in the source markets where those bookings happen and those itineraries are created, and not removing as many jobs in the destination markets. That might create a new divide between source and destination markets. Now we're in this game together. Countries in the source market in the north of Europe, let's say, to use a European example, have jobs through tourism, despite the fact that they lose their people for a few weeks and they spend their money earned in Sweden, they spend it in Greece, or earned in Germany, they spend it in Spain, etc. If this balance changes and the source markets only see the people leaving and spending money abroad and not the benefits of employment in their own country, then they will start looking at tourism as a wholly negative for their fiscal and economic outlook experience and industry. So we might risk finding a number of countries that are hostile to tourism in the years and decades ahead if we're not very much careful. So those are profound questions that we cannot answer in the course of an interview. We cannot even answer in the course, perhaps, of a SG term of 4 years. So I think what's important is to ensure that we don't put those questions aside. We need to think about those questions. We need to consult with the experts, sometimes even the futurologists kind of experts, the ones that think ahead, to start shaping answers and what we need to be doing in response to those trends.
And staying on that theme of jobs, about recruitment, about training, I mean, this industry has had problems with getting young people in particular to come into the industry, and that has been an impediment to growth for the industry. How can you see that changing? What would you do to make this industry more attractive to young people?
Well, this is an important thing, and I think it's time that we found ways to give solutions to the young people of the emerging destinations. Africa, for example, has a hugely young population that doesn't necessarily have the ability to be able to work and operate in a professional manner in the touristic community. We need to change that. And at the same time, we have countries that have a lack of personnel in Europe and elsewhere, in the more developed destinations, and might benefit from having those people work for a limited time so that they gain the experience that they can bring back to the country in order to grow the touristic industry in a locally sustainable manner. So there are win-win benefits that we can start thinking in ensuring that we have a much more streamlined flow. Now, we have many impediments to that. Visa requirements, the immigration hostility that we see throughout the political landscape. So all those things we have to be very concrete, and perhaps we need to have a concrete agreement between the nations so that we streamline this movement. We agree on common standards of education. Young tourism can help with that, and through that allow both bigger mobility, but at the same time allow the growth of the local touristic product, and as a result to keep the local people happily employed in their own countries.
You again, you mentioned Africa there. Now, I believe in 2024, global tourism encompassed approximately 1.4 billion travelers, while Africa represents a mere 70 million, which is a small percentage of the total. So again, what strategies would you have as a potential future Secretary General to enhance tourism and travel within the African continent, to basically make Africa, to give Africa the stage it needs in tourism?
Correct. Africa is very much overlooked by UN tourism currently. It's a region that is thirsty for development. And at the same time, we have a lot of big companies that we don't cooperate with, and we need to increase this cooperation, that are thirsty for investment in Africa. So we need to bring this mismatch to create an actual match of sorts. But what's missing, I think we mentioned that, is missing the trust that those changes that are required are going to be sustained through changes of government, through changes of circumstances, etc., etc. So So this is what UN tourism has to bring to bear, to be able to convince the member states that want to support investment and want to support tourism and want to support touristic investment, to tell them what's required in order to do it, to agree through MOUs or whatever to actually implement those changes and honor them from government to government, and then armed with that trust to go and bring connectivity with the airlines, investment in infrastructure, investment in private projects, touristic projects, and allow a coherent strategy to be implemented by the countries that want to bet on tourism. So I think most of the African countries want to do that. And it's actually something that the UN tourism that I dream of is going to put as a first priority.
Now, investment is a very important aspect of the hospitality industry, and obviously there is money around to go into investment in hotels and in the industry as a whole. What structural reforms, perhaps, do you feel could be implemented in order to ease that flow of investment to make more money go into the industry?
Well, of course, this is a question that has to be, region specific, and we need to see the generic thing I already mentioned. We need to have a coherent strategy by the governments. We need to have political stability, and we need to have stability of the strategy across political changes. And we need to have a sustained interest by the multilateral institutions and by the development banks and by the private sector to invest in a specific country. So this is something that we can help with, both on the strategy side and the creation of trust, and in searching and finding those partners that are interested in supporting investment in a specific area. But we can also work in a more regional manner. EU has a very big interest in ensuring that investment flows in its neighborhood and in the regions that are close to it, either is North Africa or Africa as a whole. So fostering this cooperation on a regional level, so European Union versus Africa Union, etc., to be able to bring in the kind of investments that are required to sustain this kind of growth and ensure the prosperity, the long-term prosperity of Africa, is something that I think through my campaign I will ensure that I highlight as a possibility, but at the same time commit to pursue when I become a SG and for my term of 4 years.
I want to wrap up shortly, but the UN Tourism Organization doesn't currently include nations like the USA, like the United Kingdom, like Australia and Canada, and other significant countries. If you're elected, do you believe that you can persuade these nations to participate and join the organization?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is that in order to do this and not just say yes for the purpose of an interview, we need to change the organization itself. And we need to change it in the two ways that I already mentioned. First is transparency, because no Anglo-Saxon developed nation will trust to put their money, the money of the constituents. I'm a politician. I understand the people that represent the politicians that come to our executive councils or to our General Assembly, that we have to go back to our constituency and answer to them on where the money is well spent or not. So transparency, number one, without it we can't. So we need to first fix that. And value creation for the member states. We need to create the services and products that will help the member states. Now, as I said, this value creation is different for the developed destinations, different for the emerging destinations. Of course, the focus of the countries that are missing is more on developed destinations. They're big big touristic destinations. So we need to create that value. And armed with that, armed with those arguments, I am certain that I can convince even the most difficult and most skeptical of countries that it's worth their while to join or rejoin UN tourism.
Am I right in thinking that you've said that you want to double the size of UN tourism if you get selected to the post?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that we're missing half the countries. Where I think the main areas that we're missing is the Scandinavian world, North Europe, and the Anglo-Saxon world, from New Zealand all the way up to Canada. So the aim is to close the gap and ensure that all those missing countries are certainly part of UN tourism, to increase its prominence, to increase its significance, and its ability to be heard within the UN, but within the touristic community at large as well.
Just finally, I've been in this industry for quite some time now, and I've always had this feeling that tourism has never been taken seriously enough, has never been recognized properly by governments around the world. By there's and we're talking about one of the fastest growing industries in the world, and yet the tourism minister, for example, in many industries, in many countries, is not regarded as being a very high position. I mean, obviously, in your case, it's different with Greece, a country that's very reliant on tourism. But nonetheless, how can you change that perception that tourism is a minor player when the facts say the opposite?
Well, I think this is also part of a political calculus that the COVID changed dramatically. In the sense that in some corners of the world, there's a feeling that the private sector can fix it on its own. You don't need too much except get out of their way and allow them to build. Now, what we have found during COVID is that regulation and the type of support or you do have or you don't have is very, very important for the health of the sector. And what we find with sustainability and over-tourism issues is that regulation is paramount to ensuring the good health of the touristic community. So it's not a self-regulating market that can solve all those issues. Regulation is important as such. So as a result, I think the prominence of the tourism ministers is bigger or should be bigger than what has been the case in the past. So we are there, and we're going to be a strong advocate for ensuring that the governments have at least a coherent strategy. But if they do have a strategy, then they need also a post within their government to ensure that the strategy gets implemented.
Basically, Harry, for you, tourism is a crucial aspect of the future prosperity of this planet. You think it's important, that is very important.
It is in two different distinct ways. Of course, in the ways of ensuring that through sustainability we don't destroy the planet, but also because tourism is a force for understanding. It's almost like a political movement in the sense that by going to another country, you dispel the fog of misconception about that country. So you understand more about the other people, the other customs, the other civilizations, different ways of life. But more importantly, you understand more about yourself. You understand more about the way you do things and why you do those things. And whether those are good choices or bad choices, and you see your life and the world in a different light. And I think that light leads more often than not towards peace rather than towards war. So I think that's why tourism is precious.
Harry Theoharis, thank you so much indeed for joining me.
The pleasure was all mine, really, Grant.